As we approach the final arc of Jujutsu Kaisen, a lot of plot points and character developments will be coming to head. Regardless of how great the battle of Shinjuku between Gojo and Sukuna ends up, there are multiple people in the culling game that still need to have their shining moment. One of these characters is Fumihiko Takaba, the failed comedian, and you'll be surprised to find out just how important his dumb antics will be to the end of the series. And Takaba's plot developments may actually come sooner than later. In this video, I want to discuss Takaba as a narrative device, and how exactly he fits into the finale of Jujutsu Kaisen, as well as just what his seemingly invincible curse technique, the comedian, means, and the foreshadowing that could be at play. Strap in, hit the like button, and if you want more anime manga content, make sure you also click subscribe. Thank you for watching. First introduced into the story in chapter 146, Fumihiko Takaba is a 35-year-old failed comedian living in Japan during the time of the culling game's inception. Having a small aptitude for sorcery, when Kenjaku casted Idol Transfiguration at the end of the Shibuya incident, Takaba was one of the people who had their innate talent awakened by the spell. Joining the culling game for an unknown reason, Takaba appears mostly unfazed despite being an ordinary citizen participating in a supernatural battle royale. His naturally goofy personality forces Takaba to attempt to make any situation a funny one, despite his low success rate. Part of the reason his comedy career was failing in the first place is because the only person that truly finds him funny is, well, him. Ironically enough, this is one of his best qualities as a sorcerer, but we'll get into that later. Takaba acquires no points in the culling game, and refuses to actually kill anyone, despite his proneness to pro-violence or slapstick comedy. He justifies this like a superhero would, represented by his outfit that Takaba claims is a reference to the first person to ever make him laugh hysterically. Takaba also claims to be a good judge of character, able to tell if people are good or bad just by looking at their face. What makes Fumihiko Takaba such a problem, and why we're spending so much time dissecting him and his importance to the series, is his godlike curse technique, said to potentially rival even Satoru Gojo's combination of the Limitless and the Six Eyes. The technique is named Comedian, which is of course very fitting, but essentially the ability boils down to this: whenever Takaba thinks of something he's certain will be funny, it becomes a reality. The extent of this is currently unknown, and so are any required conditions of the technique. And even though Takaba is completely unaware of the specifics of his own technique, as shown in his fight with Hazanoki Iori, Takaba's able to survive multiple explosions from his opponent completely unscathed, as well as heal any injuries he actually did acquire without using reverse curse technique. In this dangerous battle, Takaba just makes jokes the entire time and dances around Hazanoki, despite the latter giving it his all and truly becoming frustrated with the comedian. This interaction displays two things to us as audience members. One, Takaba, regardless of whether he knows it or not, is essentially invincible whenever he's in a playful, devious mood. And when that's just how Takaba is 24/7, it's quite possible not even Gojo or Sukuna could lay a hand on him without domain expansion. Number two is something that usually slips a lot of people's minds, but I think it's super important when trying to understand why Takaba is definitely a more important character than he lets on. Plenty of people call Takaba a gag character, and while that may be true, the characters of Jujutsu Kaisen themselves definitely don't think so. Both Hazanoki and Reggie Star, two reincarnated sorcerers in the culling game, are immediately put on guard by Takaba's arrival. Just by going to tell a joke, their defenses flare up, and when Takaba lands that sick drop kick on Hazanoki, Reggie even makes a comment that Takaba's cursed energy output is massive and can dramatically increase in short bursts of time. Megami even isn't too proud to admit he's glad Takaba's on his side and not an enemy. On top of being stated to potentially rival the strongest sorcerer of the modern era, Takaba is also hinted at by Angel to potentially have the power to transfer this invulnerability to others. Even she herself can't explain it, but she feels that just by Takaba being nearby was enough to protect her from Sukuna's critical strike on Kurusu's body. Also, when Sukuna releases a devastating AoE lightning strike that was aimed specifically at the encroaching Maki and Takaba, both of them, unsurprisingly, survive the strong attacks that should have done some sincere damage to the two. Maki is left unscathed, and while that's easy to write off because of her speed or durability, with Angel's theory, it's quite possible Takaba could have also helped the two of them survive that bolt of lightning. At this point, with the wild card that is Takaba's comedian, anything could be possible. One thing that's actually interesting to note is that Takaba, just by nature, not knowing his actual technique specifics, probably unironically makes the comedian even stronger. A technique like this, if the user was to try too hard to think of funny things, they might incorrectly influence reality, or even worse, think something funny happens to them instead. The comedian actually thrives off of Takaba's gullibility, and because he's just such a goofball, nothing beats his candid ridiculousness. When Takaba tried to be a comedian, he couldn't even do it. So right now, realistically, with Gojo and Sukuna off, Takaba might just be the most powerful character on the protagonist side. And this ultimately brings me to a couple of the points I'm going to try and explain to you today. There are multiple different ways as to know how Takaba and his ability can fit into a major plot aspect of Jujutsu Kaisen, but one defining part of his character is this. His introduction in chapter 146 speaks to a lot of relevance. With Nanami's untimely passing, Itadori Yuji suffers with the loss of another close person in his life. But right on time, a funny person comes into the fray and potentially holds the cards to make a huge impact in Yuji's life. Takaba, when introduced, makes a direct call to the 7-3, except for his version, it's 70-30. A lot of people, myself included, thought Takaba may have ended up inheriting Nanami's 7-3 curse technique. Obviously, we were wrong, but perhaps the inclusion of this could mean something else entirely. Going back to the common belief that Fumihiko Takaba is merely comedic relief and is only used for Gege to add some fun into such a depressing story beat, with such a powerful ability, Takaba can be the key to not only the final arc of the story, but possibly a plot point much sooner than expected. I mean, think about it. Even in the final battle of Naruto, Sexy Jutsu, the gag from chapter 1, was able to play a major role. Now, the first point I want to bring to light is the suspicious absence of Takaba during the entire Gojo and Sukuna battle. The last time Takaba is actually seen on panel is chapter 222, dressed in uniform, watching Gojo on his way to Shinjuku in order to fight Sukuna. However, after this, Takaba is gone from the protagonist group as everyone watches the battle unfold. Now, obviously, Gege could draw him in the next chapter and completely disprove this, but bear with me here. If the comedian was truly present in this room, you're telling me he hasn't cracked a single joke? 5 domain expansions. Not a smile cracked, no banter? Gege needs to default to Kusakabe for dialogue? Ah, yes, Jujutsu Kaisen's most interesting and charismatic character. There are a couple factors that line up. Kenjaku is out picking off the remaining culling game players right now. He has to eliminate all of the participants besides Suguru Geto and Fushiguro Megami in order to enact the Great Merger. Also, Gojo and Sukuna is such a critical battle, the end result of which is greatly going to affect the balance of the world and quite possibly the lives of every single person living in Japan. So that's two things that could heavily influence the timeline of Jujutsu Kaisen. If only there was a character on the protagonist team that could alter reality based on their will for our benefit. Oh yeah, that's right, that's Takaba's whole shtick. Again, there's just no way bro has been sitting quiet in the TV room, especially with all that dialogue and Gege making sure to include literally almost everyone present in some sort of conversation. Takaba has to be helping the group in some way from a short distance away. Could this be the Black Clover theory all over again? With Takaba being present somewhere on the battlefield of Gojo vs Sukuna and influencing the fight to go in the best direction? Or if you're watching this now and it's way past Gojo vs Sukuna, you're still gonna want to consider Takaba's possible opportunities up until the very end of the series. Trust me. As the other side of this, with Kenjaku being mentioned, Takaba is one of those contestants in the culling game and would have to be eliminated for the Great Merger to start. Does Takaba have the strength to take on Kenjaku? We know he at least has the capacity to survive as long as he continually finds most, if not all, attacks funny. And Takaba can also potentially protect his allies using this power as well, meaning he can act as a solid defense of keeping the other players alive. With Takaba potentially holding a development stepping stone for Itadori and also being one of the strongest chances we have at stopping the merger or influencing the story in just some significant way, it's no doubt Fumihiko Takaba will change the end of Jujutsu Kaisen. Whether that be for better or for worse, it's only a question of when. Leave a comment down below if you have any ideas or theories to add to the discussion. I want to figure this out as fast as possible, just like you guys. So leave me a like if you also agree Takaba is a suspect, so this can go out to as many people as possible. And If you want to see more content like this, just hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching this video, and check out one of the other videos on the end screen. I'll see you there. Peace.